Thanks for staying with us. So, as the controversy surrounding VAT collection deepens, join us to discuss more on this fiscal and tax policy expert and alumnus of Harvard Kennedy School of Government on comparative tax policy and administration from Harvard University. We have Mr. Olumuyiwa Adebaya. Welcome to the show, sir.
Welcome.
Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
So, in the last 1 or 2 weeks, we've been discussing VAT starting from the governor of real estate, Lagos State who came, and then the FIRS, now they're going to court. But a lot of Nigerians are still confused. They don't really understand what these numbers are. So, and even yesterday, I think Ajuri was speaking recently saying that, what is the Hullabaloo about? The most revenue that's coming from VAT, the federal government is making it from the ports and making it from the NDAs, you know, that states are not even the ones generating the most of revenue. So we'd like you to help us break it down so the person watching television right now can understand what we're talking about. What are the numbers looking at? What are the percentages? Who gets what? How does it come in? And how is it shared out? Why are the states insisting that they keep their own share?
Okay, thank you very much. I think to discuss this, we need to more or less know about the history. Okay, VAT is a form of indirect tax that has grown over time. And I think the first country to introduce VAT in the world was France, and I think dated back 1954. And over time, VAT has been seen as the most easiest form of taxation or taxes that you can more or less administer. And it also more or less increases activity. It increases based on activity levels. And over time, countries have started to develop that. And again, before VAT, we still have trade taxes, levies, and some other things. Now, let us bring it back to Nigerian context. I think far back in the 60s, 70s, there have been trade taxes, okay? And due to the fact that it's a mix of military regime and civilian regime, therefore, there was no much more issues about states controlling resources and federal. Right. Okay, but as we move on, in '86, there was more or less sales tax introduced by various military administrators in states. And by 1993, I think the former head of state, which is President Ibrahim Babangida, decided to more or less try to consolidate it and try to more or less make it standardized, because some states varies in terms of application and administration. And that's what brought about the VAT decree, which took effect 1st of January 1994. Now, this has been there all through to the moment. But what was much more unique was in 1999, we returned to the democratic government. And then there was a new constitution. But unfortunately, one way or the other, whether by omission or what it may be, VAT preceded that constitution, but VAT was excluded from the list. And there are two lists that the constitution gives rise to: exclusive list and the concurrent list. Exclusive list means anything contained there is exclusive to the federal government to legislate, to administer. Concurrent means both the federal government and the state can jointly or individually administer. Now, anything that is not in exclusive list or concurrent list automatically is seen as a residual item, which is within the purview of the states. Now, let's now move back to when Lagos State was cash constrained during the President Olusegun Obasanjo period. Lagos State have to use its own ingenuity, because when you are pushed to the wall, you think out of the box, to come up with some other taxes. And they saw how efficient it was to boosting the sales revenue. And they tried to now expand it further by introducing a form of sales tax, which was contested. And Lagos State eventually lost at the apex court, because they said sales tax has been replaced by the provision of the VAT Act. But the argument of Lagos State then was not on the constitutionality, because the court only adjudicate on what is before it.
Yes.
Now, Lagos State went back to more or less look at the books and say, okay, let us introduce another form of consumption tax, which was on hotel and recreational activities, restaurants. And the association also took them to court, but they are unable to win because it falls within the purview
of the state.
Yeah, based on issue of hospitality and recreation. And also based on the fact that in 2015, there was an amendment order to the Taxes and Other Levies Act, which deals with the collection list. And that's how Lagos State was able to win that. Okay, and that is on one side. But now, Rivers State government have to go back to the drawing board. Probably they learn from Lagos State or from other means, and they approach the court, the Federal High Court, to present the matter. And what was the matter is that the constitutionality that this VAT Act is illegal. Illegal on the fact that the Constitution that gives you the power to more or less create an act or any regulation does not give you that power with respect to VAT because it's not in exclusive list. Neither is it in. And it's on that premise that judgment was delivered.
Wow.
Now, let us fast track to today. The reality is what is good for us is what we need to look at. And when we are looking at us, we are looking at the nation as a whole. When we are looking at us, we are looking at individuals, the masses, the average people on the street. When we are looking at us, we look at the taxpayers. What will not be onerous to them, what will not create additional burden, and what will not create confusion. And that is where we are today. And the question then is, how do we move from this point? Okay, there are legal perspectives, which I will not be able to speak to because I'm not a legal practitioner.
But I want to break this because I really want Nigerians to understand. Because you have a graph here that's telling us the, I think it's the tax index, the tax to GDP ratio. And we have the lowest in the whole of Africa. One of the lowest, I would say, from this graph. And it's like 6.3%. So how do we help Nigerians understand how that it's important that we pay taxes? We are so spoiled in this country. If we do one small tax, now Labour starts carrying placard. This Labour, me, I have my girls today, they will just carry placard. What is it, Jack Robinson? They'll come out again. And I just say, yes, tell them. But so help us understand, because if we hear tax, our ears go up. We know we don't have to pay tax, so tell them go and tax their salaries first, their escargot that they're traveling abroad. Tell them, that's what we're hearing.
Okay. Issue about tax is dated back to the period of Christ, where even people approach Christ to complain about tax collectors. And I think he said, give what belongs to Caesar, and give what belongs to God, to God. It's an issue that will outlive us, because what brings about tax is compulsion, not a contractual agreement. And that's the difference, because you are compelled to pay whether government deliver on a social good or not. And that's where the issue of labor comes in, which means you won't be able to blame labor, because if tax revenue increases by way of increasing tax rates or introducing new taxes, and labor income is not affected, labor cannot more or less access good health care, housing scheme, education, and all sorts of things. Therefore, the question then is why
what are you doing with
increasing it?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's leave that. Let's come back to the issue of tax revenues. Based on the OECD statistics in 2018, okay, we discovered that Nigeria falls within the lowest bound of it, about 6.3%, whereas we have the likes of Seychelles, Tunisia, running up to about 32% of the GDP. And the GDP is a measure of output within a country or an economy. And the question then is, if most African countries, Africa average is about 23 to 27%, and Nigeria, which seems to be the giant of Africa, is 6.3%. Therefore, where does the problem lie? It varies, because it depends on if we have all of the facts before us and we are sincere. Now, one of the issues might be that our GDP, is it a representative of our output? Such that probably our GDP might have been overstated, and it might be understated too. Again, issue of tax revenue. can we say aspect of inefficiency also might have more or less reduced it on the premise that people might be paying taxes, but not everything goes into the cost. Okay, many things like that. Also, on the issue of the tax base, is our tax base expanded enough? And what does that mean? That is areas to which you subject people to taxes.
Yes.
Now, Nigeria more or less operates within more of informal sector, where people make money continually, but they are not within the tax nets. And therefore, that's why some of us, tax professionals, always fight a battle of saying, you don't just increase tax rates, because what you are doing is that you are punishing more those that are in the net, which means there are many people outside the net.
Yes.
You have to do it first.
Do you understand?
Yes.
Therefore, but because you want to increase revenue, you are increasing the rate. And at the end of the day...
Let me go on a quick break. We have to pause it for a second and come back and take some more comments and questions from the ladies. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your view will be right back.
Thanks for staying with us. We still have a tax expert, Mr. Olumuyiwa Adebayo, with us. Nima, you had a question for the break.
Yes, Aduri was reported to have said that, you know, the high number of VAT from Lagos is as a result of the amenities that the federal government own within the state. But I beg to disagree, because the activities of these people operating within the state and the effect of the activities fall back on Lagos. Apapa has case in study. The roads and everything there. The federal government has visited a few times, but I don't think that they have the will to do anything. And the weight of the effect of Apapa's activities fall back on the state government. We continually, and that of the depots, you know, the tank farms that exist in Ijegu, we come back to the state within, which is the local authority within here, to pressure for development and setting regulations. So is it true that because they have the amenities, so they should decide how it goes, or Lagos State, who has to deal with the attendant effect of their activities, should have the determining factor on how it goes?
Thank you very much. A coin has two sides, and it depends on the perspective where you're seated or where you stand. It's correct, and also Lagos State has its own argument also, and you have also more or less buttressed the two arguments. Federal government infrastructure has made Lagos State a commercial hub. There's no doubt, because Lagos State was once a capital. But again, that has also put tolls and effects, negative effects, because of the concentration on Lagos State. The question then is, a win-win situation is not an argument for who is right and who is wrong. Do you understand? And that speaks to how solution can be provided. We can't go either way, the way federal government wants it, neither the way the state wants it. Because at the end of the day, if we are to go either of the ways, the population, the people are the ones that will be at a losing end. Because the beauty in disguise with all of this conundrum is that people are now awakening towards their responsibility as taxpayers to question, to communicate, to more or less advocate and all sorts of things. And this will probably increase the level of productivity of states. And if you read my article, I said, why the conundrum and the Hullabaloo about VAT administration in Nigeria? And the Hullabaloo is what we are hearing up and down, and also for the argument about, what's it called, Court of Appeal, giving stay of execution. But lawyers, senior lawyers, at both sides are interpreting it in another way, which means you are creating more confusion. That's the Hullabaloo. But the main conundrum is this. Can we have a solution? The question is yes, but there's no solution that will be permanent, because it's a puzzle. And to shock you is that this is not only a problem in Nigeria. It's a problem across the globe. Even
the Constitutional Review fix it?
Yes. Constitutional Review will fix it. But Constitutional Review is just a document. The spirit behind the review is what will likely fix it. But again, it won't be a permanent solution.
A Constitutional Review that tilts towards what the chairman of FIRS is pushing now, remove VAT, take it to the exclusive list, would that be fixing it, or just, you know, frustrating states and creating further problems?
Now, the constitutional review that is going to fix it is the one that comes with sincerity and equity. Now, and what does that mean? It means that let us go back to it. What is the cause of this argument? The question is, states that feel they contribute more to economic activity that generate VAT have felt that they are shortchanged.
Yeah.
Are they right? Yes. But again, we need to ask ourselves, most of the data that has been put outside might not be correct. Or validated, and I will explain. Now, when you say VAT in Lagos State is 55, 50, 40, it varies. People just throw out figures. It's because Nigeria has not got to a level of annexing data and making data public for you and I to see with our common eyes and ask questions. Therefore, the essence now is that let us have data. 2, the nature of collecting data and stratifying data is even appropriate. And that is where I'm going to with respect to Lagos State. Now, when you say Lagos State collects 55%, okay, you will look at it that where does VAT come from? VAT comes from import, which is from custom. VAT comes from non-resident company, which FRS have power over it for services that are rendered into Nigeria, which shows its level of significant economic presence. And VAT comes from internal activities where the states now have purview of what you consume in Lagos, what you consume in Ogun, in Zamfara, and etc. Now, the question then is, let us pick multinationals in Nigeria. Most of them have their head office headquarters in Lagos. Let us pick big companies in Nigeria. Most of them have their head office headquarters in Lagos. Now, the VAT that relates to activities across the country, give example of telcos. All of them are in Lagos. Therefore, the head office will be the one preparing the VAT documents, doing all sorts of things, and paying to FRS in Lagos. Before now, everything counts for Lagos. Because then, nobody bothered, because everything still go back to the center, and they share. But now, the issue there today is that, will Lagos State be entitled to higher VAT collection? Yes, but not necessarily to that extent, because by the time you remove headquarter effects and some other things. And also, Lagos State has come with its own argument from the law that also says import that comes from Lagos ports should come to it. And therefore, there's another argument about that, that how will you likely collect imports coming from the ports in which federal government infrastructure, and federal government is the one that have power to deal on issues that borders on international trade.
So that's
so
what, okay, go ahead,
okay, yeah, you know, most states actually depend on the federal government due to their poor internally generated revenue. And now that some states are wanting to take ownership of their VAT, what is going to happen to those states that really do not generate enough?
Yeah, and that's why I said, let's look at the spirit. Everybody is fighting a good fight, but the approach and the strategy of the fight matters a lot so that we all don't lose at the end of the day. And what am I trying to say? It might be inappropriate to conclude that other states might lose. What is going to trigger is that they too will put up their thinking cap. And the same way Lagos State did during the regime, administration of our former presidents. That's what other states will do. And I'll give you a simple example. What impact the common masses are exempted from VAT? And what are those things? Agricultural produce, basic food items. And where do they come from? They also come from the north. What then will the north do? They will introduce VAT law on that. And what would that create? Inflation.
Expensive,
And one thing is that when you look at it, we have to look at it holistically. That's why I call it a conundrum. It's a puzzle. There's no permanent solution. Situations and time will change. That it might skew to the other side. Now, let us say that agriculture is now subjected to VAT. Agriculture is the only nature of business that is sustainable throughout the whole universe. That
no matter what season.
No matter, everybody must eat. The question then is, if we go that route, at the end of the day, they might even be generating more than those that are proclaimed.
So you're right, it is a confusing state right now. And I know the senator of Lagos State has been asking for a special status for Lagos State for so many years. I mean, she's been going back and forth on this because this would have actually helped to solve some of these problems. But unfortunately, they left it to fester, and that's why we're still having this. We have to wrap up on this issue of VAT, but I think you've been able to help us understand the basics, the understanding, to have a in-depth knowledge on where it started from. In a nutshell, I'd like you to... You said that there's really, the solution is going to be evolving based on the times. But as of today, how do we help Nigerians understand the benefits of this entire conundrum? Okay,
I think my plea would be that all parties, all stakeholders must come together and let us resolve this. And let us take away the issue of inequality out of it, and that will address it. For example, when you look at the way VAT is shared, 20% is shared based on derivation, 50% is shared equally, and 30% is shared based on population. The question is that mechanism fair? That's number one. Which means if it's not fair, how can we make it fair? Two, let us go back to the issue of the data. It then means that there will be more burden to the tax administrator and to the businesses to tend to stratify their taxes appropriately. For example, if telecommunication sells data online and people stays everywhere within Nigeria, you can't even know where they are buying the card from. Therefore, how do you apportion on what basis? Okay, let us also look at the issue of the input and output. Probably is a technical word, whereby if I buy, I pay VAT. When I sell, I charge VAT, but I recover the one I've paid because you are only paying on the marginal increase in the value you have created. Therefore, how do we offset those things? River State is 7.5%, Lagos State is 6%. But the question then is, if I buy goods in River State and I pay 7.5%, and in Lagos State, I'm charging 6%, who do I recover that differential from?
All right, we have to wrap up. Thank you so much, Mr. Olumiyu Adebayo, for sharing this with us. We'll bring you back because the conversation is still on, especially because the case is in court. And we're all waiting to see how the courts will rule on this. But it's interesting to have a better knowledge of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for joining us this morning. It's Tuesday. We can't but have a topic on health. In a moment, we'll be discussing childhood cancer. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Your View will be right back.